Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 221, recorded for July 26, 2023. The biggest innovator in SFTP in 30 years, Amazon Web Services.
Wow. You never would have guessed that.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. How's it going, Matt and Jonathan? You already heard Ryan.
Good.
I'm doing well.
All right. Well, we have some news as usual. First up, some general news. HashiCorp State of Cloud Strategy Survey for 2023. I think is published a couple weeks ago, and it was a decent read, but nothing really interesting kind of struck out to me that we should bring to the show until they cut it down by a tech sector perspective. So this is a breakdown of the survey results just from companies who identified themselves as technical or tech sector companies. This would be your Saas companies. This would be anybody who's making software or hardware potentially for the technology business, Meta, those type of companies. And so they basically said that, just the first one was, despite strong macro pressure and recent earnings reports about slowness in growth, 48% of respondents increased their cloud spend in the last 12 months, which does seem to be, going against the tide. But the more interesting one was 94% of tech industry respondents indicate the multi-cloud works, citing that it has advanced or achieved their company's business goals.
I don't believe that.
I think it's their business goal is to get out of their data centers, right? So while you're in progress of that, sure.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about that is I can see the value for SaaS vendors, right? Especially if you're dealing with large data ingestion. If you I think we were talking to New Relic, for example, they launched New Relic on Azure. It saved their customers a bunch of money because they're not doing egress charges out to the internet to AWS to basically get the New Relic data in. And they see that as a strategy that helps customers reduce money and also helps increase adoption as well as partnership opportunities. And they're going to do the same thing, I assume, with GCP and maybe Oracle and others. That makes sense. I get that. And it's a different play than, your typical, enterprise SaaS company that's making enterprise software. I don't know if this is quite as important or if you're doing business to consumer or any of the other spaces that are in the cloud or cloud adjacent. So this is a very minute audience of people, I think.
Well, I assume all of them are doing multi-cloud correctly, where they're not trying to spread out workloads across all the cloud vendors and trying to, provide arguments and keep everything agnostic so they don't, or so they can avoid vendor lock-in, and that they're, using cloud exactly how it should be, which is, take this workload that can be elastic and put it on a public cloud and take your static monolith that can't scale or never will and run that on cheap commodity storage and data center you rent somewhere. Right? They've all got to be doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I did find it interesting also that 91% of those tech companies rely on platform teams to abstract and automate away a lot of that complexity. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the key solution. If you want to be big on multi-cloud, then you are committing to invest in a big platform strategy. And that platform should then basically allow you to obfuscate the cloud idiosyncrasies and basically give you a platform that allows you to do all the magic that you need for your application.
I really wish they published the questions they asked that generate these answers and the stats from the answers, because it kind of reminds you of the toothpaste thing, like 9 out of 10 dentists recommend, Colgate, or what was the alternative? Like charcoal? Wasabi?
I mean, they paid Forrester to do it. You took the survey, then you knew what the questions were. I looked and see if it has all the questions listed, but I think they do try to highlight. Oh yeah, they do have the question in here. Then the answer: which of the following factors contribute to avoidable cloud spend, aka cloud waste, your organization? And they give you the choices they gave, and then what people selected. So they give you kind of a breakdown of it. But anyways,
fair enough. I did think ranking number 1 and 2 barriers to the tech industry. Multi-cloud barriers was cloud skills shortages. And I think that the real answer to that is that you're not going to find very many tech people who are all gung-ho about being experts in more than one cloud. I think it becomes a very opinionated thing. And either you like AWS or you like GCP and you live in that ecosystem and you become an expert. I think it's probably unusual to find somebody who really wants to do multi-cloud.
And nobody wants to do Azure, according to Jonathan. Just got left off the list.
Who's that again?
They're the AI people. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry.
They're the people with a big bank balance that swept in with their money and bought somebody who's successful at the last minute. That's right. I remember.
Mm-hmm. All right. The New York Summit was this week, including protests from anti-Israeli activists, apparently, because that's the way to attack Amazon is Israel. I mean, so many other options like anti-union busting, predatory practices. Like, there's so many other options you could protest, but apparently the New York Summit always attracts the protesters who like to protest things that Amazon is doing. They had several announcements this week. Really, most of them were not that exciting. A lot of Redshift, Glue, and Snowflake announcements that are sort of interesting if you're into things like Apache Iceberg tables or serverless for Glue. You can check those out in our show notes. The one that I did catch my eye a little bit was introducing AWS Health Imaging, purpose-built for medical imaging at scale. It's a new purpose-built service that helps builders develop cloud-native applications that store, analyze, and share medical imaging data at petabyte scale. Health Imaging ingests data in the DICOM P10 format, and it provides APIs for low-latency retrieval and purpose-built storage. I'm sure you can also probably get this on Outposts in about 9 to 12 months where you can have it in your hospital.
So it's S3 and a machine learning model that looks at pictures. Okay. Next.
Yeah. With low latency. Hey, but it sounds fancy. They announced it at the summit. So, but this did prove to me again that we should definitely not be doing predictions for summits, because I would have predicted none of those. I would have said something about AI, which they didn't, of course, announce, because why would they do that? That's the obvious thing to do. But moving into AI, they did announce Llama 2 foundation models from Meta are now available on Amazon SageMaker JumpStarts. And I'm only mentioning this because last week we talked about Azure getting them and how silly it was that Azure was getting all the OpenAI, and now Llama 2 as well. But apparently everyone's getting Llama 2 because Meta's just giving that away for free. So there you go. So you can now use Llama 2 on AWS. I'm expecting Google to announce the same thing any day, or they might have already announced it and I just missed it.
Yeah, I wonder if I misunderstood the Azure article last week, because Llama 2, from my understanding, is sort of open source, right? Like it's, and so like it really is just, you can now use this model on our platform, which is more standard than like a partnership or a commitment to invest resources into. But
yeah, they just added the model into SageMaker, so it's just there. So it's just another drop down between all the other models.
Well, that's what my question is. I wonder if I misunderstood the Azure post, because the Amazon one was much more clear and understandable, at least to me.
Well, I mean, that's a very common practice for Azure blog posts. They use a lot of weird words and a lot of weird things. There's
an awful lot of models out there, actually. If you go to like huggingface.co, there's a guy called Tom Jobbins, known as the Bloke, and he has available for download like close to 600 different models, and a lot of them are like quantized versions of the larger models, so you can run them on sensible commodity hardware. But yeah, there's dozens to choose from that have been trained on different data sets. Some are tuned for chat, some are tuned for other things. So yeah, don't be restricted by what the cloud providers actually turn into a product and sell you, when you can use any open source tools like PyTorch to take these models and do whatever you like with them, even in SageMaker.
I mean, apparently Microsoft, according to this webpage, has open source 257 models. And Google's at 593. So there are a lot more models than I knew existed out there.
I think the industry is just sort of reaching that stage, right? PyTorch has been around for a while. These models have been growing for a while, but it wasn't easy unless you were a data scientist to adopt. And now I think we're just reaching this commodity stage where it's integration directly at the platform level, because it was hard. And so they fixed that glitch, and now you can just select it from a dropdown and use it.
Well, I was doing the show notes today, and it kind of spurred the title that we used for the show today. But AWS Transfer Family is announcing more features today. And I have to say that I've seen more features for AWS Transfer Family than I've seen for any other SFTP solution I've seen in decades. Typically a vendor sets up SFTP and then they kind of go off into the races. And we've had SFTP Transfer Family now include things like pre-processors, post-processors. You get all kinds of support for like AES2, which, there's still SFTP vendors who've been around since the 90s who don't support AES2. And so, they just continue to do things. And today they're announcing another thing. And so that's why we're now celebrating the only innovator in SFTP, AWS Transfer Family. This time, they're launching SFTP connectors, which is a fully managed and low-code capability to securely and reliably copy files at scale between remote SFTP servers and Amazon S3. Files transferred using SFTP connectors are stored in Amazon S3, enabling you to unlock value from data using analytics, data lakes, or AI ML services in AWS. And I'm like, oh, so you just got rid of the SFTP part. You just went in and said, we'll get it from your SFTP server and save you the trouble of even sending it to us, which is kind of what I always wanted the service to be. So, well done.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a real thing. It's hilarious, right? In this modern age, like we're still talking about FTP and these servers, but the reality is always somewhere in the middle where, through acquisition, you end up with two different servers and you have a whole bunch of clients that know one. And if you've ever tried to debug an SSH session and configure these things for audience that's less than technical, like debugging is a nightmare. And so no one really wants to touch it. So these things are fantastic because these allow you to keep all of your things. And then if you upload, a file to one FTP server, you could have it just propagate to the rest and then have it be done all without having to debug any kind of FTP client on the remote end.
Yeah. It's sort of funny though, because now, as I think about, on GCP and Azure and like of all the services you could copy from AWS, like what service do I want you to copy? And I kind of come back to Transfer Family. I'm like, if you just copy that Transfer Family thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd also like them to copy SES because they don't have a mail service on GCP, which annoys the crap out of me. But
or Azure.
Well, Azure uses Office or Office 365. You can just send it all data over there, can't you?
No, they tell you have to use SendGrid. It's like their preferred solution, which confuses me.
No, it makes perfect sense. If I was Google and Azure, I wouldn't touch SES or an email service with a 10-foot pole, right? Like it's just ripe for abuse.
But they already have.
Have they?
So they run the two largest email platforms in the world, I would assume.
1 and 2.
Tied to inboxes, yeah.
I don't know. Feels like something that would make my life much easier.
I mean, that's the trick with SES is it allows you to generate email and send email, right? Like it's not an inbox, it's not a receiver. There's no accountability. And so it's just how you generate spam mail, which is why AWS is evil when it comes to bounce rate protection and the identity protections that they have.
I don't know. That team is my least favorite team out there because in order to talk to them or get any support for them, you have to go to your root email address. And it doesn't make sense. And I've yelled at them many times about it.
There's this Google Workspaces annoyance that I have. Anybody who's ever managed Google Workspaces, it's not an easy process. It reminds me very much of administrating Exchange 5.5 sometimes, but in a web interface. So SPF records are this pretty important security thing that came out that validates that this email sender is sending is actually valid to send for your domain. So Google Workspaces, for whatever dumb reason, whatever your root domain is that you created the thing is where the email will come from for the end of time. The email will always come from that root account. So even if you're doing it, you have aliases and you have different domain names and things like that, you can never make SPF work because it will not support that configuration because the email, you send the email, but it doesn't match the domain. So now it fails SPF automatically. So I spent hours on their forums trying to figure out a workaround for this of there's got to be a way, like an SPF protocol change or something I can do to tell it that yes, this domain is valid coming from this mail server, but it's actually coming from this other domain that is actually also valid for that domain. It just doesn't work. And I laugh at it, but then I'm sad about it because it's I would like to increase my SPF security and not get reports from domains that SPF is failing. But then, I also remember I can't send an Outlook invite from Google can't send an Outlook invite that can properly remind you. That's been going on for 15 years too. So I don't really know what they're doing at Google, but do better.
Is that because you have two domains for the same?
Yeah, I have one Google admin account. I've got one Google Workspace account, and I have multiple aliases. The CloudPod is one of them that I use. And it'd be nice that when I send as that email account, that it would then say, "Oh, yes, I actually sent the email from that domain." But it doesn't actually send the email from that domain. It sends it from the root domain that I created the Workspace account with, but then shows the display as the CloudPod. And then that fails SPF every time. It's great. Super happy about it.
I feel like we've got off the deep end because I think we were talking about Transfer Family.
You start talking about ancient technologies like FTP, then you get in the dregs about email and domain.
Next thing you know, we'll be talking about send mail and what's the other one?
Who wants to talk about MTA Relay?
Postfix. Yeah, MTA Postfix. Thank you. MTA Relay.
I just want some telnet on my servers. I just want telnet to them, guys. It shouldn't be that difficult.
And then, we can do other dumb things like Microsoft does too. Like, hey, out of the box, when you set up a brand new AD domain, it doesn't enable it as LDAP-S in 2023. Like, really? Like, why? Why aren't you doing that? Anyways, right.
Because we'd have to change all our documentation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's decades worth of AD documentation.
Yeah.
So did GCP.
Don't worry, no one looks at them.
It's obviously their commitment to never breaking anything backward compatible.
that is Microsoft has going back in spades. I'm sure you can still compile code that ran, in Visual C++ and it will work just fine because they never break backwards compatibility.
I can tell you 100% you can.
Sure, you can. All right, let's talk about GCP. Happier places.
Yes,
Happier places. Google Next is just about a month away. Google Cloud Next, of course, will be the premier Google Cloud conference in San Francisco at Moscone Center, August 29th and the 30th, I believe, are the 2 days. They have released the session catalog. So if you've already signed up to go, you can go check out all the sessions. They like to highlight all of the new sessions on AI to teach you everything to do about AI. Lots of talks about serverless and containers, which they put together, which I thought was interesting, and DevOps practices, and much, much more. All available to you in the catalog. I will be checking out what I'm going to check out when I'm at the conference as well.
So I want to know if I can get AI to schedule me in these things, because with every single conference, I always have the best of intention of going through the catalog in advance and figuring out what I want to do and getting all excited and the whole thing. But without fail, it's 5 minutes before a session, and I'm like, trying to figure out how to get across to wherever it needs to go.
Well, I mean, it's Google Next is not the size of reInvent, so it's much easier to plan and like, I don't have to transfer 3 hotels on a bus to get there in 10 minutes. So it's a little easier. Yeah, Moscone's big, but it's not that big.
I still managed to screw it up.
Yeah, I'll send you some suggestions when I go through my catalog. Like, hey, Ryan, go to this.
Please do.
Yeah. Cloud Deploy is getting deploy parameters, a new console creation flow, and reduced pricing. This all comes after they announced the parallel deployment capabilities. Several of their customers reached out and said they like the ability to use the deployment parameters and parallelization to focus deployments on just child targets in the thing, which is how this deploy parameters now lets you specify those specific child targets. They've also reduced the price of the active cloud deployed delivery pipelines and expanded no charge usage to include single target delivery pipelines, making it easier than ever to get started with cloud deploy. And they have new wizards and simple configurations to allow you to deploy your first pipeline with simple delivery and targets, and release directly in the deploy console all your trials and experiments in a nice new visual GUI. Which doesn't love a good GUI in deployment? Apparently no one, because Jenkins still survives. So.
Well, that's the problem, though. I think is that I think a lot of the business that the cloud providers are seeing now are coming from cloud migrations. I'm sure they're getting some startups, some cloud native apps as well, but a lot of the business is going to be from migrations. And people either have Jenkins already or some other kind of CI set of tooling and build processes and things like that. So if Google are going to provide services for deployments, then it would really be in their interests to make it so that you could also do on-prem deployments with the same set of tools. Otherwise, it's like, well, we're using Jenkins on-prem, but we move into the cloud. So do we use Jenkins for the cloud, or do we have 2 separate sets of workflows now? Like, I feel like, they've all got database management and storage management and migration solutions in place, but they really don't have a good multi-cloud deployment tool.
Why would they have a tool that helps you deploy to multiple clouds that are competitors? I mean, other than Anthos.
I don't know about Google, but I know that AWS, you can run code deploy on-prem, and I've done that at one point where you install the agents and it will handle the deployment there, which is a nice way to do a migration if you move your tooling first.
Yep.
put it into the new tooling, and then all you need to do is flip over the host later on.
Makes it sound so easy.
Yeah, it's so easy. It's like an afternoon, Jonathan. Come on.
Yeah, hire Matt. It'll be done in no time. Yeah, I miss the I miss a lot of things from AWS working in the GCP world now, like the SSM agent. Number one, I think
that one is my number one miss. Like it's funny, as much work as I did to get off of server-based workloads, the one thing that I ended up leveraging a lot was, even for container orchestration, was the SSM agent for just running ad hoc things, gathering inventory statistics, and all kinds of things. And so it's one of those things where there are options, but it's so nice to have it just built in and just go. I really do miss that.
Yeah, the secure connections, everything else. It makes life so much easier just to have it there and done, and you don't have to think about it. I agree. Definitely one of the big things I miss.
Yeah.
I was going to say SES, but based on our prior conversation, I might get yelled at.
Don't miss that. I mean, kind of a tangent, but so I've been thinking about what to use for container orchestration at home, because who doesn't want container orchestration at home?
Yeah.
Been through lots of different options, and what I've settled on? I've settled on ECS Anywhere.
Nice.
Oh, nice. I still like ECS.
It's just easy.
I'm just a simple person.
Yeah.
And I don't want to deal with things.
Yeah, I'm still a big fan of it. I was doing some stuff with it today, and I'm just like, it's just so simple. I don't have to think about all of this complexity I get with Kubernetes. Maybe because it's just been abstracted away, and I just don't think about it. But I still really enjoy it.
Absolutely. Right.
But that's what I want of the cloud vendor.
Yeah.
Make it simple for me. Give me a solution that is like, I can't mess it up. Or Ryan can't mess it up. It doesn't matter. Both of us can mess it up worse together. We've proven this in past lives.
I'm using Fargate a few times. I'm not a huge fan of Fargate just because it's expensive for what it is.
And limiting.
If you're in a really small environment, I've recommended it because all your security is taken care of. So if you have to deal with audits or anything, it's worth it. But you got to be at a small enough scale, like under 10 or under 15 containers running in your production environment.
I have a friend I'm helping with something. We're only running like one container, and I'm like, that container is not worth $90 some odd a month that it costs to run it between all the things. So.
That was like 18 to 20.
I mean, it depends how much RAM you need, but that's always the key. All right. Well, if you're an on-call engineer who is supporting the Google Cloud, you'll be excited to know that when you are now not at your desk or out getting dinner or whatever, that you can now open a cloud support case directly to Google from their Google Cloud mobile app, just in time to be ignored and not fix your issue by the time you got home. So at least you got the ticker started on that SLA, which is appreciative. So by the time I get back from picking up whatever I'm doing when the outage happened, maybe Google will have paid attention to me by then. But they most likely won't, so I'll still be waiting. But hey, it's an improvement.
So to be fair, out of all the mobile support, that mobile app for cloud uses, this is the only one that I might actually use this one. I don't need to troubleshoot my EC2 consoles. I don't need to look at my network firewalls and GCP. I don't need to, do so many things, but figure out if I've got a response from a support case so that I can move on with my day. Yeah, actually, that one I might use.
So I will say I have definitely support case is definitely a use case I've used the mobile apps for, and then rebooting an EC2 box just as a Hail Mary, like I'm on my way home, let me reboot this box and hope it fixes it, and sometimes it does, which works. So those are the two use cases I've mostly had. But yeah, like looking at performance metrics, looking at different things, trying to set up anything like forget all that use case. Like no time for that on my little teeny tiny phone to look at logs. Well, Azure didn't really have any news that I thought was worthy. They had another puff piece on AI, but I killed it. I was like, there's no way we're talking about that again. But they, Wiz, filled in the gap for us tonight, which typically would be follow-up. But they reported back on doing some research on the recent attack by the Chinese government onto Microsoft, the Storm 0558 vulnerability, if you will. Wiz, of course, for those of you who have been paying attention, is one of the now leading cloud security researching companies, as well as a provider of cloud security posture management solutions. Wiz basically reports that Microsoft indicated Outlook and Exchange were impacted by the token thing, but Wiz wanted to know more. Like maybe they could figure out how that compromised key was compromised. So they did a bunch more research into it, and they concluded actually that the scope is potentially much, much worse, with multiple types of Azure AD applications potentially being impacted, including every application that supports personal account authentication, such as SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, and any app that supports logging with Microsoft capability under certain conditions could be compromised. They also call out Microsoft's IOCs as being BS, as the encryption keys and source IP addresses are helpful, but there's no way for you to actually verify that whether those encryption keys are being used or not used, because you don't have access to the logging that would be required to know that they were doing so. So it's nice on the surface, but not super helpful. And they basically conclude through their research that they believe that whatever key was able to allow them to sign an OpenID V2 token, which is a big security issue. Microsoft, of course, responded to the Wiz article and said, many of the claims made in this blog are speculative and not evidence-based. We recommend that customers review our blog, specifically our Microsoft Threat Intelligence blog, to learn more about this incident and investigate their own environments using the indicators of compromise that we've made public. We were also recently expanded security logging availability, making it free for more customers by default to help enterprises manage an increasingly complex threat landscape. Which that's a non-statement you could have made, Microsoft. So
yeah, I like the changing the security logging to free, though. I think that's a good response. I'll give them credit for that one, because that's really what I want.
It's one of the things I really dislike about Azure is you have to pay for security for a lot of things. So like in AWS, sure, you want your stuff to run in a VPC, doesn't really cost you anything extra. But for Azure, in order to get it to be integrated into your VNet or anything else, it's always like you have to do the higher end tiers. And this is, I feel like, a good case where they got called out on it. And now it's like, okay, we're just going to give it to free to make sure we don't get called out on it again. But to me, security shouldn't be extra. It should just be table stakes day one.
I don't know. All that log is going to be paid for by something. So
it's still interesting to me how little Microsoft has started to do and really push out security stuff. They just keep being embarrassed. They hired Charlie Bell over a year ago now, I think, right? We're from AWS.
Close to it.
To lead their security practices. And I think it's been nothing but embarrassing security event after embarrassing security event. So I wonder if he's hitting resistance internally or if there's other issues at play. But, Microsoft's never really been known for the highest amount of security of companies in the enterprise space. But, you're a SaaS vendor now. It's a slightly different problem.
Yeah, he's also dealing with 40 years of tech debt. So, I mean, I'm not quite sure how quickly anyone could single-handedly change the org.
I mean, definitely. The tech debt could be part of it, too. It's a good factor. I mean, again, is it resistance internally to him or is it tech debt? It's always the question.
And change can be slow. I mean, even willing, if you have a willing audience, there's a lot of things that can go or needs to go together or go in lockstep. And, planning is definitely the hardest part of any tech problem. Right. And so I get it, but I'm hoping that it's not resistance. I'm hoping that it's not politics. I don't know why I'm optimistic on this, but hoping it'll slowly, like a frog in boiling water, get better. Oh wait, that's not how that works.
I will say I do find Wiz to be kind of a little bit sensationalist in their reporting on things, and they are clearly making claims which are entirely speculation that they do not have the evidence for. And we know they don't have the evidence because they literally say they don't have the evidence, even it's not available.
I mean, they're being transparent about it. So I mean, I appreciate this is, they're very clear in that they say this is what we believe may have happened. We have no evidence that we're right, but based on what we can see from external factors and what we can look at in the Wayback Machine and those things, we think this is a valid assumptions that you should be concerned about, or you should at least be pushing Microsoft to ask. And I think you sort of need that guy who's an advocate for you, even if they're a little crazy, because sometimes you don't know all the ways that something can be. But I actually don't mind them as much as I like Orca security is the one that drives me crazy because they're super sensationalist in their headlines, and so maybe I'm just so immune to Wiz's BS because Orca is so much worse than they are. But I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is a problem, Jonathan.
I felt the same way you did, Jonathan, or Justin, which is that they definitely told you they were speculating and then walked you all the way through the speculation, right? Like, here's why we're speculating. And that for me is that's how you're going to answer a lot of questions. You're not going to get a smoking gun on some of these things, because they're not going to tell you here's the security fingerprint that was taken, right? Like you're never going to get that out of Microsoft. And so I do feel like, there's a certain amount of speculation that has to be done. And I definitely appreciated the explanations. It might be wrong, sure, because they don't, they only have the public data versus what Microsoft has, but Microsoft's also not telling us which key and how it was stolen. And so we can't validate these things except for through basically an investigation and some detective work that Wiz did.
Yeah, I suspect that they're not disclosing information yet, but they will in the future. I mean, normally when there's an ongoing investigation, especially if it's state-sponsored hacking, then the FBI would be involved and other agencies. And it may just be that they're not willing to share that information right now.
It's possible, yeah.
And I'm sure that's the case. And they could also state that, like, hey, we do know how it happened, but we can't report that until after our investigation is completed or whatever.
Yeah, I can imagine it now in the blog post. This attack was so serious. We've got the the FBI now involved. That's going to look great for people's comfort levels.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe not so great.
I did note that Wiz was being sued by Orca actually for infringement of their intellectual property.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the terms of that case. I haven't looked at the case filing on it, but that one seemed a little like, what did they steal that no one else has? Because like you guys are all in cloud security posture management way after Evident.io and Redlock were in it. So if anyone stole anything, it's going to be stuff from those guys who founded the whole idea. Maybe something there. Yeah, it's
probably not.
It is what it is. It's just a way to make them look. Because Wiz is definitely growing faster than Orca is, so gotta threaten them, I guess.
Have you been waiting months and months to hire your new AWS, GCP, or Azure architect, only to have them be poached at the 11th hour by a startup with a juice bar? Initiatives stalled because you're having trouble hiring? Well, I have a simple solution: Foghorn Consulting. Foghorn Consulting provides top-notch cloud engineers to the world's most innovative companies and can be burning down your DevOps and cloud backlogs as soon as next week. Foghorn-certified AWS, GCP, and Azure professionals are armed with infrastructure as code, and from day one will be designing performant, optimized cloud-native or hybrid environments that deliver on the promise of cloud. Their FogOps solution even provides on-demand cloud engineering to augment your existing teams. Visit www.foghornconsulting.com or send an email to cloudtalentnow@foghornconsulting.com and tell them the CloudPod sent you. Your dedicated FogOps team is with you for the long haul, and they bring their own juice.
All right, let's talk about Oracle. There was this article I saw here, and since Azure wasn't helping us this week, I thought, well, this Oracle one is sort of funny to me. Easily install Oracle Java on Oracle Linux and Oracle Cloud. It's a perfect match. And all I can think of, it's a perfect match to get you locked in to paying Oracle forever. For those of you who leverage the Oracle Cloud, you get apparently a free license and full support of Oracle Java SE and Oracle Graal VM versions at no extra cost. Oracle Java is, of course, a fully supported Oracle Linux, fully supported on Oracle Linux and compatible with Intel, AMD, and ARM-based processors. Which is great. So we get you hooked on all of this great Java technology that uses all the proprietary Oracle stuff and on the Oracle Cloud. And then when we jack our prices up to astronomical levels and you leave us to go to AWS or else, we'll just sue you and get licensing for using Oracle Java SE that you don't get for free anymore. It's a brilliant play. And it's a trap if you're trying to use multi-cloud.
Yeah, I think they're trying to take a page out of Microsoft's book. It's like, oh, look what they're doing with SQL licensing. They can charge less for people on their own cloud than other people have to pay. But the thing is, you can always use this OpenJDK. You don't have to pay Oracle, and you probably shouldn't.
Even on Oracle, you can.
What's funny is that I had the same thought, and then my response to Microsoft doing it versus Oracle doing it is radically different. It's like when Microsoft does it, I'm like, this is their only chance of being relevant in the cloud space. It's a good idea. Cloud SQL's hard. When Oracle does it, I'm like, those slimy bastards.
I mean, it's different because SQL Server doesn't have a free competitor of equal, caliber.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Well, and Oracle has misplayed their hand so much that the only reason that the open source JDK exists is because of how predatory Oracle has been.
There was a an open source version of .NET for a while, wasn't it? Like Mono.
Yeah, Mono's still around. Yeah, we still use Mono.
But I do think they ended up getting bought or sponsored by Microsoft. Like Microsoft actually contributing code to them. Like there's some weird thing that happened under the latest regime over there that they got up close and partnered with them in some way. So it's a good way not to get sued.
Mono was first released in 2004. Did not see that coming.
Is that for .NET or for Microsoft SQL Server?
It's .NET. .NET.
So this is really the .NET framework.
Yeah.
That's how you were able to run like Office on Linux for a long time there. All right. Well, that is it for this week's news. But we do have a cloud journey series today. So we're going to have the infamous cloud shared responsibility model, which is a framework that defines the security and compliance responsibilities of cloud service providers and their customers. And you will hear this all the time when you're talking about security in the cloud and what the cloud needs for security. And basically, Amazon phrased all of this out and Azure copied it wholesale, basically saying that security between the cloud provider and you as the customer is your responsibility and our responsibility. And they give you pretty detailed breakdowns of ISO controls, SOC controls, etc., that they then map to here's the parts that are our responsibility, here's the parts that are your responsibility. There are several areas of security and compliance that are in this, including cloud infrastructure, platform, and services. And there are several key points that we can talk about if we want to. But what do you guys think about the shared security model?
Makes a lot of sense. I think it's very fair. I think it's well defined. That's it.
I mean, I think it's very clear cut, like what you're saying. It's well defined. So it's like, okay, these are the lines in the sand of what is yours and what is mine. Data center security, 100%. The cloud providers, OS, patching, 100% yours. So I think they made it in such a way that it's very clear defined, so that there's no gray area, and that's what actually makes the cloud and the cloud security responsibility model actually make sense and be easy for people to understand.
I also think that being able to leverage a partner to handle their portion of that security is like an immense value of using a cloud to host your service, right? It's so they can do it at a larger scale. They can do it across systems, and they can move workloads around it. If you're a smaller company, it's a lot more difficult to orchestrate. It's a lot more expensive, or at least a bigger hit to the bottom line. And so I think it's a huge value of being able to do that, and it prevents a lot of smaller companies, when it used to be in the data center days, from patching or keeping up to date at all, just because it was too difficult.
It also enables a lot of smaller companies to get these higher level security standards, because half of it's just taken care of. Cool. You want, using SOC as an example, you want to get SOC 2 compliant? Cool. Here's all of AWS, and here's all the low level stuff that, they handle, how they handle security, and reference all their stuff. And cool, I'll give you then all the higher level stuff. So it kind of also, I was going to say deburdens, but I don't think that's a real word. But I'm going to go with it. Deburdens the workload of the smaller entities to be able to get these compliance, which a lot of larger companies, when you sell to them, say you have to have these standards. Was that the mic drop? Like, we're done?
I wonder if there's any differences between cloud vendors in the way they implement this. I mean, I would assume not. I assume it's a very bare bones set of responsibility assignments, and I can't imagine that any vendor would take on more responsibility than they actually absolutely have to. And one thing I do like is that part of the shared responsibility sort of model requires that the vendors make the tools available to you and the data available to customers, so that they can realistically take on the responsibility of the security needs of their environment. So they do provide CloudTrail logs, audit logs, things like that. Now you may have to pay for them, and that's potentially a downside. But at least the tooling is there so that you can be responsible for those things.
I mean, there's a little bit of difference in the way GCP does some of their models, just because there's a shared security model, but then there's also what is colloquial terms sort of the shared fate. And, in a lot of cases, it's an add-on service that you pay for. But, it's basically a way to say, hey, Google, prevent me from using a non-compliant workload. And it's like a feature that that they'll enable there. And they do that for both security and for operational concerns, which is kind of interesting. I thought that was a unique take on that sort of shared model, where typically it's about defining where the responsibilities lie, but Google's almost offering like we'll move the line for a nominal fee, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, it's just an insurance policy.
But they're going to control what you can do then. At that point?
That's the trade-off is flexibility, right?
Yeah, they basically make sure that you're meeting their standards to get that partnership with not only their insurance provider for cybersecurity insurance, but also for how much are they willing to commit in liabilities to you, and so then there's audits and things you have to go through, I think, to do all that stuff. So it's a nice marketing play. It's not really something that I think a lot of companies are going to take advantage of if they have a relatively good security model.
I think the more interesting part of the shared security model is going to be the services you use. So if you're using, SaaS versus a PaaS versus IaaS, and the different levels that you get and like where your line in the sand kind of falls with them. Because as you get to more completely managed services on there, there's less things that you can even do. So yeah, you might need to check the box saying, hey, enables the container to be running on, inside your VNet or inside your VPC, but, if you're running an EC2 instance, you have to manage a lot more. You have to manage the OS. So one of the other pieces about it is understanding what the tools inside the platform have, and then where your level of responsibility is inside of there.
I mean, defining the cloud security model is one thing. Do you think the cloud vendors are doing a good enough job of making sure customers understand their responsibilities?
I don't think they do, and I think a lot of their defaults are not necessarily secure by default. I look at Amazon EC2, like you create a new EBS volume, you have to check the boxes to make it encrypted versus it being encrypted all the time. I think like the non-secure options or the less secure options should be something I have to go make a conscious choice to do. And I feel like, particularly in Amazon's case, I don't know about Azure, so I don't use it as much, or GCP in this case either. But if you're not going by default secure, then I don't know why you're not at this point, because it's just checkboxes in a GUI for most of the time when you're doing these things.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going to go. I wasn't thinking of EBS. I was thinking of the S3 and the news we've heard about public buckets and things over the years. And I know Amazon's gone some lengths to make that more secure by default, including having to type in ridiculously long strings of text into consoles when you want to do things like create public buckets or delete things.
I mean, I think that all the cloud providers have made efforts to make the more secure option the default option. I think it's easy to say that it should just be on by default, but it's a lot harder to go through and update all your API methods for every EC2 function to make sure that it's actually calling the downstream service the right way with the right variables and the right things, and has the sources of truth or inputs into that to do it. And so I think it takes a little bit of time. I think that at least AWS and GCP, there's definitely now, the ability to control these things from a central place across all your projects or all your accounts. And there's, different ways that you can sort of control and maintain that ecosystem. So it may not be as fast as we want, but I do think that it's moving in that direction.
But it's for net new services that they're building out. That I feel like isn't enabled by default. And sure, it might not be, your own KMS key. Maybe it's the default KMS key, for it, or something along those lines. I'd be curious to see if AWS Health Imaging is by default encrypted. or how they, are they using KMS? I mean, I hope so, because it is literally targeted towards healthcare, and that terrifies me from a HIPAA standpoint. But, it'd be curious to see all these new features. And most services, when they come out on AWS, are very much MVP. And I've noticed that a lot of them don't support KMS day one, where, that should just be a default thing that is table stakes. And even, with Azure, a lot of things, you have to go to the higher tiers in order to get it. And I get, in order to do some of these things, it does cost some money on the back end to, implement security features, but it should just be default. Or if you want to go, like Justin said, if you're in the UI, make it be a little bit harder to make it be less secure. If you're already using Terraform or any other IAC tool, you already hopefully know enough that you are looking at these types of settings day one, or you're leveraging a tool that will scan, your IAC code and say, hey, you're making this public, bucket public. Like, maybe you don't want to, and building that into a pipeline, or just running it locally at least.
I remember the thing I was going to mention, actually, and it was around something that I think is missing from the model, or at least I feel like the cloud vendors aren't doing a good job of kind of fulfilling what I think is one of their responsibilities, which is educating people properly in how to do things securely. Because the number of pieces of example code, whether it's in blogs for product announcements or things in GitHub repos, this is how you get started with Lambda. First, we create a Lambda function and assign it the admin role for the account. Oh, really? How is that setting a good example? I think if we really want to get on board with shared security, then not leading people to think that that's okay. It should be a part of that.
But Jonathan, how else do I run my Lambda if it's not an admin?
I mean, I know it works as admin, but you've got to figure out why it doesn't work as the other thing.
So I haven't seen that in a while. Like, it used to be much more of a prevalent thing where the permissions were sort of like brushed aside right at the beginning. But lately, all the things that I've been doing anyway and researching, it's much more prescriptive in terms of permissions. I feel like that message has been delivered. It may not be across the board, but it is, at least not. I think it's a change that's happening.
It's definitely getting better for sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like SSM when it like initially was created, it gave it like S3 star or something really wide. And now it's, there's another role that is like much more defined down.
Well, and then you have like the new verified permissions model. They just announced it, Reinforce. Like they're definitely doing things that I sort of would argue they should have done a while ago, but they are at least making progress. So it's a plus, but they definitely need to. I think they could step up a lot more. I think, again, training and stuff would be great. Make it easy to access the training, not just the docs, and explain to people why this is not a secure thing or why it's a certain thing. Because reading the doc, you understand the doc maybe and the steps required to do something, but like the why behind why you're doing it is not always there in the docs.
I was going to say I actually like the idea of such a well-defined contract between the customer and the vendor, and I think it's probably something that should be implemented, outside of perhaps cloud vendors. Perhaps you should think about doing this with your own customers.
Oh yeah, no, that's a very good point. That's a great idea.
Like if you want to paste something that's somebody's social security number or some critical information into a field which is not designed for that, then we will not guarantee that it will be encrypted and stored in a way or handled in a way conducive with handling that type of data. So I think we should start being very clear with the customers about their own responsibilities. That's what I have with customers.
A little paper clip that pops up in the corner, and it looks like you've copied in a credit card number into this free text field.
Exactly.
So while we were talking about that, I was pulling up this Wiz lawsuit because I was curious about.
Oh, I was reading it too.
So a couple real time follow up items here. So basically. Orca is saying Wiz has built its business on simple business plan. Copy Orca. This copying is replete throughout Wiz's business and has a manifest in myriad of ways. This lawsuit was filed on July 12th, by the way. Orca, which was launched in 2019 and in May raised a $20 million funding round. Wiz was founded in February 2020 and has already been valued at $10 billion. So that's pretty massive. Wiz had to say, Orca has tried to compete with Wiz on several fronts and failed, and now they're pursuing less innovative methods to compete. That'd be a fun lawsuit to keep an eye on, I think, over a while. But yeah, Orca's basically saying they're wholesale copying everything we do. Apparently, they have a patent, like this is where I go back to the point of like, are those patents actually valid? Because again, like there's companies that existed way before Orca. The only thing Orca kind of did that was really unique was the ability to take EC2 instances and basically, scan them offline, the EBS volume, so you didn't have to actually tax the resources of the box. But that was all enabled through EC2 APIs.
Right. And so that is one of the patents is the ability to scan elements at rest for security issues. I'm skimming through the article, but the latter half of the points are evaluation by SourceForge between the features of the two businesses and the fact that they match. And it's just this feels very much in frivolous lawsuit territory because there's no substantive violation of the patent breaches, which is the main claim in this. And so I feel like this is more about sensationalism and headlines than it is about actual content. I wonder if this will hold up in the end.
Well, it's one of those, do you really want to get into discovery? Because if you go into discovery on these two companies, they're going to have talking crap about each other. Are you willing to expose all your business, all these business things and areas of focus, or are you going to be able to obfuscate it out enough? It's a perilous lawsuit. I assume it gets settled for something stupid, but if it goes to court, it'll be interesting to see if it actually makes it that far.
I'm going to stick my neck out and say that I don't think that patent should be enforceable, because if you think about the type of forensic analysis tools that have existed for decades, whereby you take a snapshot of a running machine that's virtualized, you can take a copy of the RAM, you can take a copy of the disks with VMware. They're doing that, except sort of outside the forensic investigation space. It's sort of like an online process, a semi-online process, rather than being a completely offline process. But all the technology and all the tools they're using are exactly the same tools that have been used for decades.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, I go back to Orca couldn't do what they're doing without Amazon having built the capability for them to do it. So, even if you say that I have a use patent on this pattern, a big part of the use pattern is Amazon's. And I assume Amazon has patents on it as well, or trademark or things. And then you've got, like you said, all the tools that you use. Once you have the data to actually scan it, you're just using common security practices you use forever, just on a system that's offline. So, it's,
at a high level, they're offline scanning backups of data, and that's nothing new. It's kind of annoying because that was a feature request I made to Amazon or AWS a long time ago, was the ability to read snapshots directly from S3. Sadly, Orca got there first.
And they did it. That's how Orca does it.
Yep.
They gave it.
Yep.
They gave you your feature request, and then Orca took it and productized it. So.
Yeah. My one vote didn't count towards that feature, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. All right. Well, I'll see you guys next week here in the cloud.
Yep. See you later.
All right.
Good week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel, go to our website, thecloudpod.net, for sign-up instructions.